Today we're going to talk about resumes. My name is Suzanne Ceravelo, and I am currently founder-owner of Inclusive Career Services. I am a certified professional resume writer and career coach. And my goal today is to help you to show that you are a perfect fit for the jobs you target, answer any common resume questions, and give you a competitive advantage over anyone who is not in this, and I do an air quote, room. So this is a little bit about me, a good amount of information about my background, and I don't usually like to talk about myself so much, but this is very important for you to understand where I'm coming from. It's sort of what I call my disclaimer moving forward with this presentation. Really, there is no right or wrong way to write a resume. And you're going to talk to 10 different people, and 10 different people are going to give you 10 different opinions, and that's okay. What I'm going to talk to you about today is based on my career, my experience with resumes, which has pretty much been my entire career. I've had a relationship with resumes in some manner, shape, or form. So everything I'm about to say is, as we move forward here today, is I'm giving you not so much, kind of my opinion, but from my experience and from all different angles. So as I said, I've worked with resumes for my entire career, beginning from my senior year in college when I was an intern at Colgate-Palmolive on Park Avenue in New York. And I worked with one of their recruiters helping to fill positions in their marketing area. And at that time, they were recruiting exclusively from MBA programs. So I was given a list of, things to look for on literally the physical resumes that were coming into them. I had a pile of paper of stacks of resumes and said, go through these, and I want to see only people that come from these universities and have this in their background. And so there was a good pile and a bad pile. And that was literally being screened by, my eyeballs, my human eyes. But what was very important for me to know was I had a list of words that I had to look for on these resumes. I had to be quick every day. I'd go in for my internship and there would be a stack of probably at least 100, 200 resumes. As you can imagine, Colgate-Palmolive being a big consumer product company, everybody in the marketing world wanted to work for them. Once I graduated college, I worked for an executive search firm as a recruiter. They specialized in financial and accounting positions. So I had to kind of bone up on what all the accounting terminology was, learn about, at that time, it was the big 8 accounting firms. They're now down to, I guess, the big 4. I had to learn, what auditing meant, what CPA meant, what parts passed in the CPA exam meant. And as I was helping client companies fill positions that they were seeking, I would be given a list of requirements, a list of skills that they were looking for. And as I scanned the resumes of candidates who were coming through us, I had to look for these certain things and then pass the resumes on to the client companies. From there, I went on to become a recruiter. I flipped over to the other side, as in that world, was I went into the corporate side of human resources. And I first started out as a recruiter in a medium-sized manufacturing company, and then eventually went on to work for a larger Fortune 500 company. But in those roles, I was working with the hiring managers internally to fill positions in their departments. I was screening resumes pretty much, over and over again, advertising for jobs. I would sit with, could be a hiring manager for their IT area. They would give me a list of requirements. I would advertise for it and then screen the resumes as they came in and then pass them on to the hiring manager. And what I also found, by this time, I'm seeing sort of a trend in that if those resumes didn't have those special skills, those words on them, they were being read. They weren't even being passed out of human resources usually. And one of my other roles actually in the Fortune 500 company was as a compensation analyst. So not only was I helping doing recruiting, I was also responsible for evaluating and writing and evaluating job descriptions. So I was that person helping to write the job description for a specific job in the company, I really knew what went into writing a job description, and those words that are in the job descriptions are very important and very intentional because they are there to help you determine what grade level that job will be put at, which is connected to what salary range that job will be associated with. And these words are really, really important as you're going through resumes. And nowadays, I was doing this initially during the time when it was only the human eyes kind of reading these resumes that came through the regular mail. Now, the same process is going on. It's just that it's happening with other technology. There are software programs, artificial intelligence now that often are the first set of quote unquote eyes on resumes. Sometimes not. It depends on the organization. In the nonprofit world, it might still be really the human eye if it's a smaller organization. But either way, you don't know, but it's still those words that are very important. From the corporate side, I eventually went on to go into higher ed and became a career counselor at Drew University, finishing up as director of their career center. And I'm talking about that because now at this point, I am not only dealing with one company that I'm working for internally, I'm dealing with a number of companies, everywhere from FBI to State Department to Peace Corps to many other nonprofit organizations, Wall Street, publishing companies, you name it. I worked with them as they were seeking to hire our students, our alumni. And again, I had their job descriptions. I had people, I was sort of the filtering system from the resumes going through to them, and I would see what they liked and didn't like. In that role, I also served on many search committees for the university. So not only was I helping to find positions and place students in other organizations, I was also hiring for my own department, but also helping to search for the right candidates for other departments internally. So when you're in on those meetings, you are often hearing what even just your peers and colleagues are thinking about resumes and their feelings about it, what they like and don't like, what's passing through, what's getting sent to the next level, and what's getting put into the recycling bin, so to speak. I also developed a specialization in the sort of law enforcement world. I became the deputy program coordinator for the New Jersey Police Community Affairs Association, where I developed, along with a few other colleagues, a career development program for students looking to go into law enforcement. And while I was working, primarily in that field, I was working with law enforcement agencies from federal down to municipal, seeing what was working in that world. I also, as a volunteer, and this was sort of I was motivated by my own son going into the military at the time, but I have helped a lot of military veterans who are transitioning from military, the military service into civilian careers. And their civilian career aspirations run the gamut. So that became very tricky, how to translate the military speak into civilian terms. But now at least you get the idea that pretty much everything I've done in my entire career has been with resumes. So why do we write a resume? Well, we write a resume to get a job interview. Your resume really isn't there to get you the job, but hopefully it's going to get you the interview. And the job interview preparation is a whole other animal. But we want to make sure the resume is there to get you in the door, at least get you a conversation. The resume is meant to summarize your experiences and to outline your qualifications. And I say that separately because you need to summarize your experiences in a well-defined way on a resume, but you also want to outline in an easy to view, easy to read kind of format. And it is there to help an employer quickly learn about you. I often, sometimes I really don't like to have to tell people, but you have to be prepared and assume that the person that is going to be, you're either going to be going through some kind of a software scanning system that is going to have keywords plugged in advance. Those keywords are going to come from, their internal requirements. And then it will, if you pass that, it will eventually land into somebody's hands or into their email box or something. But you want to make sure that the first person that really has eyes on your resume can see what you want them to see very quickly, because most of the time you may get 5 to 7 seconds. Again, the larger the corporation, the more jobs they have open in different areas, that's about it. If it's a personal connection that you have with somebody, or maybe a smaller organization, they may spend more time, but you have to assume that it's going to be very, very brief. So some of the common questions I've had over the years about resumes are, what are the characteristics of a successful resume? What information should be in a resume? How long? It's the age-old question. And then there are a couple of types of formats that work for resumes. And one is what most of us know is the traditional chronological resume format, where it's you list your experience in a chronological format. And then there's a functional type resume. I'm going to show you some examples in just a little bit of what those couple formats will look like. My disclaimer here, this is all based on my experience, my relationship with resumes over the years. But my experience tells me that the characteristics of a successful resume are, it must be easy to read and understand. And I can tell you that if a resume comes to me, whether it's been screened through whatever kind of system technology and initially gets into my hands, if I have some resumes that I have to sort through and I can't see what I want to see right away, I might not take it any further. If something is embedded in there deeply, but you think it's really relevant, you got to make sure it pops. So it needs to be easy on the eyes. You want to focus your resume on your skills. You can tailor it and should tailor it for a particular job. It's very easy to do. You just, sometimes have a couple different versions of your resume. Some things might be highlighted more over other things, depending on the job or jobs that you're targeting. And, how do we know what skills are needed for this job? This is usually when I throw the question out to the audience and wait for a response, but I'm going to answer it for you. It's the job description, the job posting. Your best friend in your job search is going, and even as you write your resume, if you are, or revising it, if you're moving on in a career or just looking for another position in the same field, read through the job descriptions first that are out there, the job postings. Because as I said, when I go back to my days as a compensation analyst, when I was writing those job descriptions that those postings were based on, I know how important those words are in there. As I said, they're very intentional. And you can pretty much regurgitate back to somebody in your resume, the same terms that they're using, assuming you have that experience. You don't want to make it up. But if you do that, whatever software system, whatever artificial intelligence, whatever human eyeballs are going to be looking at that resume, those words will pop. If they're looking for experience in a certain technology or a certain, whatever a management type of skill, you get it on there and in the language that you see used in the job postings. Read through a number of them, because I guarantee you're going to see the same theme. You're going to see a lot of the same words in your particular field being used. Use action words to define your responsibilities and your accomplishments. Make sure it's very proactive as you describe any of your job-related experience. And there's lots of cheat sheets out there. You can Google what are some of the best words to use in resume, the ones that maybe sound, not so good. And most importantly, your resume must always be 100% truthful. And I say that because of my own experience, having read many, many resumes, having hired for a lot of positions, you can tell. Those of us who've had a lot of experience in that world, no matter what part of that world we're in, we know when some resumes have been exaggerated. You don't have to put everything on a resume. If your experience, maybe right out of college or right out of high school, if you've had some jobs that maybe really have no relevance to what you're looking to do now, and you have enough experience to fill up, related experience on your resume, it's okay. You don't have to put everything you've ever done. I don't list the farm stand that I worked for my first job in high school, you know, when I was dusting off tomatoes. I don't have that on there anymore because it's okay. So what information should be in a resume? First of all, you want to identify yourself. And one of the trends, so to speak, that has probably developed over more recent years is that many people, and it really is okay if you don't want to put a physical address on your resume. You can, particularly if you want people to know that, hey, maybe you're applying for a local position and you live right nearby and you think that will help you. That's great, but you don't need to. And I don't want to stereotype it, but I know I've worked with a number of female clients. I mean, it could be male or female who don't feel comfortable putting their actual physical address on their resume. So email, phone number is sufficient, and doesn't look like you're hiding anything because people can just Google you at any time if they want and probably get more information about you anyhow. An objective, we call it an objective, we call it a summary or a profile. I always feel that is very helpful, and I've heard different opinions on it over the years. Some people say that's not necessary, that the resume speaks for itself. People should know what you're looking for. But again, I can tell you my own experience, having been on the receiving end of resumes, particularly in a large corporation where I was responsible for hiring or recruiting for multiple jobs in multiple departments at one time. If someone just sent me a resume and it didn't say, looking for a staff accountant position in this organization, I may not have the time to read through the resume and try to figure out what it is they're applying for. So I use the word objective here still, but really it could be under a summary statement. It could just be the title of the position that you're seeking, and that could be changed every time you send out the resume if you want. I think it's helpful. Your education should certainly be on your resume. Where it is kind of depends on, again, the relevance that it plays in the position that you are seeking. I can tell you in higher ed, education, especially for academic positions, is usually the first thing up there because there's such an emphasis on that, especially for, people want to know what your, if you have a PhD, master's degree, PhD, and maybe what your concentration was or your research was. So that's usually, they're referred to more as CVs when you're sending anything into, for an academic or research kind of positions. Even in private industry, typically the format would be education right up top. And if it's not, it can be on the bottom. Any continuing education, any special certifications you may have is always, should also be on there. It shows your kind of dedication to your field, and just, it tells a little bit about you as a person, that you continue on to educate yourself and, be proactive in your career. Obviously, you want to put any work or professional experience on your resume as it is relevant. It could be, again, it kind of depends on where you are in your career. You might have relevant experience and other experience. If you want to show some of the things you have done in the past. So it really depends on what you've done and how you want to highlight that. Often, it's good to show that you maybe have had some community service, volunteer experience. That sometimes, and I find this particularly helpful for people who might be returning to work, either just starting out in the working world or returning to work after a number of years, where sometimes their volunteer experience is actually the most relevant experience they might have. Or maybe they're just changing careers, and that can just be listed under experience. And it doesn't mean you have to be paid to have to show it as work experience. So there's lots of ways of showing that. So never discount any volunteer work you've done. I list activities because, again, I've worked a lot with student populations, and often that is something that is some of the meat on a student resume if they haven't had much work experience, but they've been very involved maybe in college or even in high school or whatever it is, and you want to show some leadership ability, some maybe ability to work with numbers, if they've been treasurer of a club or whatever it is. So, and sometimes I had an experience recently where I met a woman, you know, she was in like an administrative role and looking to find another position. But in learning more about her, I found out that she had been a race car driver, and it was nowhere on her resume. And I said, that to me, because her experience was, you know, it was pretty, I don't want to say minimal in a derogatory way, but it wasn't anything popping. But the fact that I saw that she had been a race car driver, I thought, I would absolutely want to meet this woman. That tells me so much more about her and about her character than anything else that was on her resume. That's somebody who's a risk taker, and she's, you know, really breaking barriers, especially in a field that is so male dominated. So that's sometimes, even as a more experienced worker, experienced adult, some of your activities might draw some attention by the person looking at your resume. Any special skills and abilities, obviously you want to get that down there. It could be language skills, it could be technology skills, anything else in between. Definitely list that. Again, where it is listed on the resume will be determined on the importance that it would have in the position that you seek. And then again, any professional associations. In this case, the AFPNJ would be a great organization to list that you belong to. You were involved, you attend their conferences. And that shows your commitment to your field and your proactiveness in your own career path. So the age-old question, how long should the resume be? This is, you know, I have had a 3-page resume. I have also read a 20-page CV. I don't recommend that. I've scaled mine back to a 1-pager, and I'm going to show that to you briefly. I made up a resume for a resume writer so I can show as an example. But I don't like to say there is really no law, there is no right or wrong way to do this, but I can tell you, and I don't usually like to hop on the bandwagon of trends, but I can tell you that there is a trend to shorter resumes, and I think a lot of that has also evolved with people being able to look you up on LinkedIn, just Google you and find out more about you anyway, so you don't have to have a whole laundry, you know, your life story on a resume. And I'm going to show you an example of somebody who I think kind of kicked off this trend a few years ago. So be brief. I would say, if I had to say, limit it to 1 to 2 pages. Edit rather than use more pages. So now comes the formatting, chronological versus functional. The chronological format is what most of us know is the traditional format, with your experience listed in reverse chronological order. Typically we say, okay, this is where I'm at, or this is where I have been most recently, and this is what I did before this, and so on and so forth. The functional resume is, and I love this resume format. I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. This one is really based more on your competencies and skills. So rather than the focus being on what you did and when you did it, it's more about what can you do and what have you done under some of these, these skills that are so important to the positions that you're seeking. And to figure out those skills, as I said, that's where you want to go back, read through all those job postings, figure out what are the maybe 4 most important things that people are looking for that you can break down your skill set under using their terminology, and then show what you've done under each of those skills. And then at the end, you talk about just where you've worked and when. It's a great format. I've used this format primarily with military veterans, as I mentioned, who are transitioning, because, and my own son was in this world, and I knew what he did was very important, but couldn't have, he might as well have been speaking to me in a foreign language. So instead, you break down his experience by his skill set, leadership, management, whatever it is, and then talk about what he did in civilian terms, and then mentioned, he was mentioning he was in the military, or any of these military veterans. It helps career changers, or as I say, those with unconventional work histories. Maybe someone has stayed home to raise children and now they're going back after a big gap of time, and they want to kind of not, show that right up front, it's a great format for that too. You might, you're going to list an experience, or a skill set that you have, and then talk about what you've done under that. You want it to be brief with just a simple list of your positions held at the bottom. The focus is not on so much where you've worked and when, it's about what you can do. And really what it's doing, and this is why I love this format so much, is it's doing the work for me as the receiver of your resume. You are now, telling me what you could do rather than me having to read through multiple jobs and all these bullet points and trying to figure out, did you do something that's relevant to what we're doing? What we need here, you're showing it to me right up front. So this is a sample of, this is actually a chronological sample. And this is somebody I worked with in the fashion design industry. So not anything I really knew a lot about going into it. Anybody who knows me would understand that, but I had to do a lot of research. This person, it was very important to, in this case, to keep it in a chronological format because it showed a progression in the same industry, a progression of responsibility within a couple of positions. And the titles were very important. So we kept it in this format, but we highlighted a few skills up top. And those words came out of a lot of job descriptions that I read, a lot of research I did about, the fashion design world, obviously working with the client as well to understand as best as I could that world, and it worked out very successfully. So as you can see, it's one page. We fancied it up a little bit, and the samples I'm going to show you are not overly fancied up. I just want you to see how it can be very clearly, you can clearly show somebody your background at a glance. And the things that you want them to see are right up top. This is a sample of a client. Of course, I changed the names and everything to protect their identity. But this is somebody who had come to me and was currently working, wanted to find a new position in the training and development world, sort of like in the corporate HR world. But her concern was that she, because she had had a gap of time off and was, in her opinion, a little older than her peers and felt that that was going to work against her in that world. We chose this format, worked out really nicely because, again, it highlighted her skills, and the skills here, curriculum development, instructional design, collaboration, these were all things that were in probably every job description I read about this, this field. And so we determined that these were the things we really wanted to highlight about her experience and describe what she'd done under each of those categories, and then mention her professional experience, where she had worked and when. But the focus at this point is not so much on her age, and that was a concern for her. She has great education, certifications and all that went on there, but mostly we wanted people to see right up front what her skills and abilities were as they matched what was being sought after. And this is me. So this is me as a resume writer. And again, I had a 3-page resume at one point in time, and even I realized it's too much. I could talk about all the things that I've done, but what I did was bring it down to 1 page. So mine is also right now in a functional format. And I use terminology that is out there. If I read resume writing job descriptions, resume writer job descriptions, these are a lot of the terminology that's out there. But I also use the opportunity to talk about some of my other experience in the career world, career coaching, programming, because kind to show the breadth of my background. And then I list my professional experience. And if you do the math, you could probably figure out how old I am, but it's not popping out there, on the front of the page. In my case, I've stayed pretty much in the same field, the same umbrella of the field my whole career. And I don't have a lot of jumping around, but I still thought it was more important to have my skill set up top rather than in a chronology, because I did have a gap of time. I am one of those people that stayed home for a while and raised my kids. So While I was doing that, I was working on my master's degree, but that's hard to explain in a traditional resume. So this is a format that I thought would work well for me. And here's somebody who also has a one-page resume. This came out a couple years ago when, as I said, this trend was starting to develop. And I don't want anybody who's here today thinking that you absolutely can't have a two-page resume, but this was sort of what tilted the scale or tipped the scale a little bit when Elon Musk showed the world in one of the business magazines that he too could have a one-page resume. Of course he could have no resume and probably get hired, but anyhow, it was, it spoke very loudly, and the format is different. It's interesting. I don't know that I would personally want to rate myself in front of the whole world on my skills and competencies, but he can do that. And so it's showing, and it was really sending a message that one page is kind of preferred. So also last year, and I'll have to look to see if they've updated this at all, but for the year of 2020, last year, Forbes magazine came out with the top skills that employers are looking for. And I can tell you, as I work with clients, I see these words in there. Number 10, collaboration, is, I think, one of the top ones I look at, and adaptability. But it doesn't mean that you have to have all of these skills in order to get a job anywhere. But the idea is that these are the things that you want to make sure you're promoting about yourself if you have some of these backgrounds. These are sort of those, other than maybe the technical things, kind of those soft skills that a lot of employers are looking for. So data literacy, it doesn't matter really any field that you're in, you need to be comfortable with data. Critical thinking, any kind of critical thinking, analytical skills are helpful in any field. So in some way, when you talk about your accomplishments or your experiences, if that's something that you've had experience doing, make sure that's in there. Your tech savviness, that's a struggle for me, but I'm working on it, and here I am on Zoom. Adaptability and flexibility, absolutely. And I think more so today than ever. I am actually working with a client right now who wants to show that because, and we're putting that into her resume to show that she is adaptable to work both remotely and in person. So if even a position that she's seeking wants somebody to work either way or in a hybrid type setting, that's something we're trying to show, because she has done both very successfully over the last year. So, that's something that now more than ever, I think, is so important. Any creativity, your emotional intelligence, and also your cultural intelligence. And that is also become more and more important these days, to have a sensitivity to different cultures, to diversity. It's why I call my business inclusive. I'm open to everybody, and leadership skills, always important. Your ability to make any kind of decision making. Collaboration, I can't tell you how many times I see that word come up in job postings, job descriptions that I read when I'm helping my clients. Here's our basic checklist. No grammar, spelling or grammar errors. And I'll tell a quick brief story about how I almost didn't get my job at Drew University. I had a spelling error on my resume that it was very innocent. It wasn't a matter of not proofreading it. I literally thought a word was spelled differently, and it was Myers-Briggs type indicator. I was trying to show that I had experience. It's a career personality assessment tool. And I was trying to very proudly show that I had experience working with that. And I spelt it M-E-Y-E-R-S, Briggs. It's actually how I thought it was spelled. But it's actually spelled M-Y-E-R-S, Briggs. But thankfully, the director at the time, I was referred to her by another colleague of hers. And that's how she got my resume, brought me in, interviewed me. We hit it off great. She did hire me, but she told me after I was hired on my first day of work that, oh, by the way, you had a spelling error on your resume. And if that had just come to her, really unsolicited. If I had just sent it in and she didn't have any other connection or feedback about me, she would not have hired me. So I got by, but I'm still, to this day, I am so careful about spelling errors on my own resumes and anybody I work with, because I know that can, put you to the no pile. It should be neat, clean, and professional looking. So the samples I showed you, as again, they're not all fancied up with other than Elon Musk's, but you want something very simple but very neat. I'm going to say again, 1 to 2 pages. Like I said, I don't like to make it sound like it's a law. It's my recommendation. The layout should make the reading easy. Use of white space is effective. That means don't cram it in too much either. If you really want to, you're trying to get it on one page and it looks so crammed, if I can't read it, it's like I'm seeing nothing. So make sure that it's laid out kind of nicely. Your information should be logically recorded. And that varies from person to person. Again, there's no one right way to do that. It depends on what your background is, what you're looking for, and what you want someone to see about you. The use of these action verbs, proactive, statements about your accomplishments and results. So everybody has my email address. You have my contact information, my phone and email. So feel free to reach out anytime, and I'll be happy to talk more. But I wish you all the best, and I hope everybody does attend the full conference, because that's going to help you with your networking if you are seeking for employment and embellishing your career.